If it is
What I
confirmed,
know is that
will you take
everything I
accountability?
share, everything I talk about,
Mr.
as
Secretary,
of
does
Defense
accountability apply to you or not?
is classified whether I talk or not.
Does it apply to you or not?
Does what apply to me or not?
Accountability. You said accountability is back at the Secretary.
And you know what? The Houthis were held accountable for shooting at our
I'm
ship
just asking if it applies
very
to you.
successfully.
I'm not asking about the
previous
Houthis.
administration let our ships get shot at, and nothing was done about it. And thankfully, because of the skill and courage of our troops on the battlefield,
I'm just asking about
we
I
actually
reclaim my
put
time.
them in a place
I
where
reclaim
they
my time.
called for a ceasefire.
I reclaim my time. I'm just asking if accountability applies to you. It's a very simple question.
What you are about to see is not a standard congressional exchange. This is an exposure. This is what happens when a Trump official gets cornered by someone who arrived with one objective, a straight answer, and refused to leave without it. Representative Seth Moulton walked into that hearing room with no theatrics, no grandstanding, no performance designed for social media clips, just a focused, methodical mission. Get a direct answer. And here is why that matters. Because the subject of his questions was not procedural. It was not a budget line or an administrative detail. Moulton was asking about the texting of military launch times, F-18s heading into live combat zones, on an unsecured platform. Let that sit for a moment. Not casual conversation, not bureaucratic back and forth. Operational military information, aircraft departure times, aircraft entering hostile airspace and facing active anti-aircraft systems. Moulton's question was simple. Where did that information originate? And was it classified? Yes or no? Watch what Hegseth does instead of answering.
Gentleman yields back. Chair now recognizes a gentleman from Massachusetts, Mr. Moulton.
Thank you, Mr. Chairman. Secretary Hegseth, I'd like to clarify a few important details for the record. When you texted the launch time for F-18s going into combat over enemy territory facing anti-aircraft missiles on an unclassified signal chat, did that launch time come from Central Command, yes or no?
I know what you're referring to, and there were no
It's a very simple question. Did it come from? It's a very simple
or-
question. Did it come from Central Command?
Well, in this committee, no way in which I communicate or what I communicate on a successful strike is something that I would share.
So you can't even identify the combatant command under which this operation occurred?
Well, everybody knows the
Okay, so everyone knows it's Central Command. So when Central Command sent you this information, did they send it on a classified system or an unclassified system?
Well, as you know, having served yourself, any way that the Secretary of Defense communicates or provides information in and of itself is classified and not to be discussed.
So what was the classification marking of the launch time when it was sent to you? Because DoD regulations require information on classified systems to be marked.
What was the classification mark time?
Yeah. What was the classification marking? Because
Again,
DoD
classifications of any information in an ongoing operation that was successful are not things that would be disclosed in a public forum.
But you can very well disclose whether or not it was classified. It's not classified to disclose whether or not it was classified. And in fact, DoD regulations state that any classified information has to be labeled with its classification. Was it classified secret or top secret?
What's not classified is that it was an incredibly successful mission against the Houthis.
Okay, so it was classified. So are you trying to say that the information was unclassified?
I'm not
Okay,
trying to say
that's what
anything.
I thought. You're not saying that. So you took classified information from Central Command that had a classification marking on it, because that's what's required by DoD regulations, and you put it on an unclassified system. So we're going to get a report in a few days from the DoD Inspector General. And if the DoD Inspector General finds what is pretty obvious, both to you smiling there in the witness seat and to all of us up here, that the information was, in fact, classified, do you plan to take any accountability for that?
That right there is where it starts unraveling. Moulton asks directly, did those launch times come from Central Command? Yes or no? Hegseth stalls. He deflects. He reaches for vague language. I wouldn't discuss that here. Everything I communicate is classified. Stop. Because that last statement is the trap he just walked into himself. If everything you communicate is classified, then why was that information being transmitted through an unsecured signal chat? Moulton sees it immediately and follows the thread directly. If the launch times came from Central Command, and if duty regulations require classification markings on information originating from Central Command, then that information was classified, by definition, by the regulations Hegseth just cited. Now Hegseth is locked. He cannot say the information was not classified, because that directly contradicts what he just stated about his own communications. He cannot acknowledge it was classified because that confirms sensitive operational details were transmitted through a platform with no security clearance required. There is no exit, and you can see the calculation happening on his face in real time. The hesitation, the vague language, the refusal to commit to anything that can be directly quoted back at him. Meanwhile, Moulton is not moving. He is not broadening the scope. He is not accepting the subject change. Every time Hegseth tries to widen the conversation, talking about mission success, what can be disclosed, what the operation accomplished, Moulton closes the gap again. This is not about whether the mission succeeded. This is about whether classified information was mishandled. Those are two different questions. One is being used to obscure the other, and Moulton is not letting it work.
As I pointed out at the time...
you said that accountability is back. Does that not apply to you?
As I said at the time, Congressman, there were no names, targets, locations, units, routes, sources, methods, no classified information.
Okay, so if it comes back that it is classified, will you take accountability or not? We've already established, you've already admitted that it was classified because everything you get from CENTCOM is classified. You just explained that to me. That's how you justified not answering the question.
Not what I said. I didn't confirm any classification or clarification.
Okay, so if it is
what
confirmed,
I know is that
will you take
everything
accountability?
I share, everything I talk about,
Mr. Secretary, does accountability apply to you or not?
Is classified whether I talk or not.
Does it apply to you or not?
Does what apply to me?
Accountability. You said accountability is back at the Secretary.
And you know what? The Houthis were held accountable for shooting at our
I'm
ship
just asking if it applies to you.
very successfully.
I'm not asking about the
previous
Houthis.
administration let our ships get shot at, and nothing was done about it. And thankfully, because of the skill and courage of our troops on the battlefield,
I'm just asking about
we
I
actually
reclaim my
put
time.
them in a place
I
where
reclaim
they
my time.
called for a ceasefire.
I reclaim my time. I'm just asking if accountability applies to you. It's a very simple question. We use leadership by example.
Of course. Unlike, I serve at the pleasure of the president like everybody else does.
So it only applies to the president, not to you.
I serve at the pleasure.
You talked about the success of the Houthi operation. About how much money did it cost? How much money did you spend on missiles shooting at the Houthis?
Well, you'd have to compare that with what it cost.
I'm just asking how much did it cost?
Divert our shipping lanes around.
I'm told it's several $100 million, maybe close to $1 billion. How many U.S.-flagged commercial ships have transited the Red Sea since your so-called successful operation?
Well, thankfully, unlike the previous administration,
the answer is zero.
Military vessels transit.
No. I didn't ask about military vessels. I
which
asked
would
about
be the
commercial
precursor
vessels.
for
how many commercial vessels?
Transit.
It's been several weeks. How many commercial vessels, U.S. flagged, have transited
well,
the Red
would you, Mr. Congressman, put civilian ships?
The
through
questions
dam
are not to
before
me,
military
Mr. Secretary.
ships?
They're to you.
We have responsibly put military.
The answer
ships
is zero.
through first.
I reclaim my time. How many generals and admirals have you fired?
I don't know the exact number. But
you don't know the number. It's 8. Can you explain why any of them were fired? Like, just explain why was the Army JAG fired? Why did you fire him?
They all serve at the pleasure of the president. And I think
no, I'm just asking you why.
General Kane is a great example.
I'm just asking you why.
That we need
you probably learned at Princeton what why means. Why did you fire him?
They serve at the pleasure of the president, and we want better representation in each and every of those.
You can't explain why you fired any of them?
Gentleman's time's expired. Chair, and I recognize the gentleman from Georgia, Mr. Scott.
This is where it becomes fully devastating. Moulton shifts to accountability. One question: if the Inspector General confirms this was classified information, will you take responsibility? Hegseth pivots immediately. No names were shared, no targets, no locations. Moulton does not blink. That is not the standard. The standard is whether the information itself was classified, not whether names were attached to it. Then he goes further. You just told this committee that everything from Central Command is classified. You said that. So which is it? Hegseth backtracks. That is not what I said, except we all heard it, not a minute earlier, in the same hearing room, on the same record. This is what getting caught looks like. Not a dramatic confession, not a moment of visible breakdown, just the quiet, unmistakable sequence of someone contradicting their own statement seconds after making it and hoping the room does not notice. The room noticed. Moulton noticed. And then Hegseth does what every official does when the specific question has no defensible answer. He pivots to the Houthis, to previous administrations, to anything that creates distance between him and the question currently on the table. Moulton reclaims his time, brings it straight back. Does accountability apply to you? And this is the moment that says everything Moulton came to expose. Hegseth answers, essentially, that he serves at the pleasure of the president. Translation: accountability does not flow from law, does not flow from the Constitution, does not flow from the American people, or from the institution he was confirmed to lead. It flows from Trump. That is the stated position of the Secretary of Defense of the United States. Loyalty over law, presidential approval over constitutional obligation. Moulton does not editorialize. He lets the answer stand in the record exactly as it was given. Then he moves to results. How many U.S. commercial vessels have passed through the Red Sea since this operation, the one Hegseth described as a successful mission? The answer: 0, not one. Hundreds of millions of dollars spent, possibly approaching $1 billion. Operational details transmitted through an unsecured platform, and not a single American commercial ship has been able to transit the waterway the operation was supposedly designed to reopen. What exactly was the success? Moulton asks it plainly. Hegseth has no answer that holds. Then the final question. 8 senior military officers fired. Generals, admirals, high-ranking officials with decades of service and documented records of performance. Why? Hegseth cannot explain a single one. Not one specific reason for any specific dismissal. They serve at the pleasure of the president. That is the complete answer. No justification, no transparency, no accountability to the institution or to the people funding that institution with their tax dollars. Just, they serve at the pleasure of the president. This is the pattern, not an isolated incident, not one bad decision made under pressure. A systematic replacement of experienced leadership with loyalty as the primary qualification for command. Senior officials removed with no explanation. Classified information handled without appropriate security. Accountability defined entirely by proximity to one man's approval. And a Secretary of Defense who, when asked whether he bears responsibility for any of it, redirects to mission narratives and subject changes rather than a direct answer. Moulton did not shout. He did not perform outrage for the cameras. He asked the right questions. He followed the logic. He closed every exit before Hegseth could reach it. And he let Hegseth expose himself, in his own words, on his own record, in a room where every answer becomes permanent. That is what accountability actually looks like when someone in that room is committed to producing it. Not theater, not noise, precision. And the reason this hearing matters beyond the specific exchange is exactly what Moulton named directly. Without this, without people who arrive prepared and refuse to accept deflection as an answer, this behavior continues. Unchecked mishandling of classified information, unchecked removal of experienced military leadership, unchecked loyalty tests applied to the institution entrusted with national defense. This is not a political dispute. This is national security. And the person running the Pentagon could not answer the most basic questions about how he is running it.